Enthusiast or buyer, cars or bikes, all you need from the auto world is right here on the Autocar India channel. Subscribe now. After years and years of will they, won't they, Toyota has finally taken the plunge and launched a proper premium mid-size sedan in India. And here it is, the Yaris. And just to make sure it enters with a bang, they've loaded it to the teeth with equipment, especially when it comes to safety. But it's not like the competition was just sitting idle all this while either, and that's why we've brought some of the competition here today. To my left is the brand new Hyundai Verna, which builds on the immense strengths of its predecessor. And here to my right is the Honda City, ever popular, and with the 2017 facelift, it really got a lot more appealing. Now, because the Yaris is only available with a petrol engine, these two have petrol engines as well. And if you're wondering why the Maruti Ciaz isn't here, there's a very good reason for that. You see, as we're filming this, Maruti is actually putting the finishing touches on a brand new petrol engine that will very soon go into the Ciaz. And so we figured once that's launched, we'll bring it along again and try this one more time. But in the meantime, we've got three very capable mid-size sedans. We're going to tell you what they're like to drive, what they're like to be driven in, and what you get for your money. In fact, let's start with what you get on paper, so bear with us because coming up are some specs. We're testing these cars in the highest spec you can get for a petrol manual, and that means the Yaris VX, although our test car is only a V variant, the Verna SX optional, and the City VX. That's right, you don't get the top ZX trim in a petrol manual. Still, the City is in the middle on price, the Yaris is the most expensive, and interestingly the Verna is the most affordable, which was rarely the case with the previous generation car. And that becomes more impressive when you look at its long equipment list, which includes segment firsts like ventilated front seats and a hands-free boot function. However, the Yaris VX too is packing several segment firsts, particularly on the safety front, like 7 airbags, ESP, disc brakes at all 4 wheels, front parking sensors, and a tire pressure monitor. You also uniquely get convenience features like auto wipers and a powered driver's seat, but it misses one popular item, and that's a sunroof. The City does get a sunroof and one-ups the others with full LED headlamps and a steering that adjusts for both reach and rake, but overall it does lag a bit behind the other two. And since this is the VX, you miss out on auto headlamps and wipers from the ZX, and there are just 2 airbags instead of 6. All 3 cars get touchscreens, but it's the Hyundais that has the quickest, easiest to use interface, and the only one that features Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. The 3 cars are about the same size on the outside, but the key figure here is that the City and Verna have 50mm more in wheelbase compared to the Yaris. And when it comes to luggage storage, the Yaris and Verna do have decently sized boots, but it's the City's that's the most practical with a massive 510 litres. The Yaris' 1.5-litre engine's 107 horsepower and 140 Nm puts it at the bottom of the power and torque charts, with the City coming next with its 119 horsepower and 145 Nm from its 1.5i VTEC unit. The Verna, as before, rules the roost on numbers with 123 horsepower and 151 Nm from its larger 1.6-litre engine. Both it and the Yaris get 6-speed manuals, while the City sticks with a 5-speeder. But what does that mean in the real world? Well, our tests show that the most powerful car, the Verna, is indeed the quickest, but only when it comes to in-gear or roll-on acceleration from 20 to 80 in 3rd and 40 to 100 in 4th. From a standstill, it's the City, also the lightest car incidentally, that is the quickest to accelerate to 100 kph. The Yaris, unsurprisingly, is the slowest one here. The City's lightweight probably goes a long way to help it be the most fuel-efficient car here too, and in our real-world test delivered 11 kpl in the City and 17 out on the highway. The Yaris isn't too far behind with 9.6 kpl and 16.4 kpl, but the Verna doesn't do as well with 9.2 kpl in the City and just 13.5 on the highway. That's enough facts and figures for now. Let's move on to what you get on the inside of each of these cars. The Yaris' dash is unique in look and sensibly designed, with nice bits like the 4.2-inch color display near the dials. But for all its use of beige materials, the cabin never looks or feels premium enough. The larger plastics are hard and shiny, and the mock stitching is not fooling anyone. Build quality, however, is pretty solid. It is the Verna though that feels the best built. Cabin quality levels are also the best here, and it's things like the knitted roof lining that make all the difference. The dash is neatly laid out and is quite low to afford a reasonably good view out. With the facelift, Honda spruced up the city's cabin with some soft touch plastics on the dash, but overall quality isn't at Verna levels. The asymmetrical dash divides opinion too, and that cool looking touchscreen for the climate control system is distracting to use on the go. And on that note, it's time to get to some driving. When you first get behind the wheel of the Yaris, first impressions are actually rather good. At low revs, it's really very silent, and all you get is a slight hum from under the hood. The other thing is tractability. It's able to pick up the pace at really low speeds and low engine speeds quite effortlessly, and it almost feels like it will never stall. Just the lightest prod of your foot will set it off again, and that's really quite amazing. Should be really good in city traffic. But the issues do arise once you ask anything more of the Yaris's powertrain. For instance, that refinement starts to go away as soon as you cross past 3000 RPM and you're presented with this sort of drone and a bit of din from the engine. Like so. And as you push the engine harder and harder, you become more and more aware of the Yaris's relative lack of power. The clutch is also a bit heavy, but the gear shift has a nice positive feel to it. Now yes, the Yaris is a little bit smaller than the other two, but you'll actually like that when you're attacking a set of corners because it feels nice and tight and compact and quite nimble. And that's only a good thing in terms of handling. This is complemented by surprisingly good body control considering the really good ride you also get, and a steering that, while not bristling with feel, is still pretty okay. The Honda City back in its heyday had a bit of a reputation for being a favorite amongst boy racers, and for good reason. And I'm happy to say a lot of that has filtered into this latest generation car, and of course the biggest part of that is the 1.5 litre VTEC petrol engine, and it retains that traditional VTEC trait: good pep low down and a lot of pep at the top end as well. It's really a joy to rev this car out to its red line, and can you imagine a car that wakes up again past 5000 RPM? Now I know that's not how people would drive a family car every day, but if you find yourself on an empty stretch on a quiet evening, you know what to do. Trouble is, it feels a little bit flat in the mid-range, so you will need to learn to drive around this, and overall it isn't the most refined motor either. And if you like driving, you'll really like the dynamics of this car as well. Body roll is fantastically contained and it's got a rather sharp steering. Yes, they've made it lighter and dialed in a bit more slack to make it easier, but I'd still say it's sharper than either of the other two. So the City remains excellent fun to drive, and this is something that could never have been said of the old Verna. So what about the new one? Though this is an all-new Hyundai Verna, it continues using the same old engines, and that means this is a 1.6 litre naturally aspirated petrol engine that makes 123 horsepower, and that's the highest in this group test. The thing is, from behind the wheel, at first you can't really tell, and that's because the power delivery is spread so thin across the rev range, it's so linear that there's never that urgency or sudden hit of power. It's just so smooth. It's also because the engine is just so refined. Yes, the Yaris is quiet, but the Verna just beats it. It's even quieter. In fact, even when you rev it out, you get only the slightest buzz. Where the new Verna has improved drastically is in the handling. With this new Chassis M platform, things are so much better. What still remains a dynamic sore point with the Verna, however, is the steering. Yes, okay, it's quite direct and it's got a bit of weight to it this time around, but there's just no feeling in it. It's absolutely lifeless, I'm afraid. And that just doesn't give you confidence when you're going around corners. As ever with Hyundai, gear shifts are just buttery smooth and an absolute joy to execute. You really don't mind shifting in this car, and the clutch is super light as well. Now there is a chance you might be chauffeur driven in one of these cars, so it's important to take a look at what things are like in the rear seats too. Now there are a few welcome changes in the back seat of the new Verna compared to its predecessor. There is, for instance, this rear sunblind now that can be removed if you like. There are finally a set of AC vents back here, and in a show that Hyundai is keeping up with the times, the rear charging point down here is no longer a 12-volt socket, it's a USB port. But unfortunately, some things have not changed either. For instance, the space back here is not that much more than it was in the previous car. You see, legroom is just about okay for this sort of car. Omkar was driving is 5'10", and headroom is not that great either. If you were a taller person, you might have a bit of trouble back here. Now, because this all-new Verna uses an all-new chassis and completely reworked suspension, it's done wonders for the ride quality of this car. Yes, the old Verna was always a comfortable rider, but it tended to float far too much and was way too bouncy when you were going fast or if you went over some bumps. The good bit is that this new Verna contains it so much better this time around. Yes, it does bounce a little bit, and yes, it is the softest in this trio, but by God, it's so much better contained and it's far more comfortable for it overall. In many ways, the back seat of the Honda City is a lot like the other two. For instance, it's got a rear armrest, even though it's set a little bit low. It's got big bottle holders in the doors, and well, it's got rear AC vents as well. However, there is no escaping the fact that this is by far the most spacious of the three. Look at the amount of knee room there is. Even the headroom is really good, and the seats as well are just superbly cushioned and comfortable. As far as back seats go, it's really hard to fault this one in this segment. Unfortunately, what lets this rather excellent backseat experience down is the ride quality. It's set up a little bit too firmly, and that means compared to the others, you get tossed around in the backseat quite a bit more over bumps and undulations. Yes, it does stay flat on a smooth surface at high speeds, but introduce some bumps and things get decidedly less peaceful back here. Now, the Toyota Yaris may seem a little bit small on the outside, but it's got a decent amount of room on the inside. Knee room, for instance, is actually a little bit better than what you get in the Hyundai Verna, although headroom is about the same, I would say. It also has this really weird, quirky armrest from the front that protrudes into the back for some reason, but it doesn't contain any rear AC vents like you might think. That's because the rear AC unit is on the roof, like you might find in an Innova. Now, it's not really an AC, it's just an air recirculator, and I will admit it looks a bit odd, but in practice it actually works really rather well. You can set the fan speed and it just blows air-conditioned air right onto your face. We weren't too thrilled about Toyota's decision to offer 15-inch wheels on the Yaris rather than 16 inches like the competitors over there, but it does have an effect on ride quality, a positive effect. The smaller wheels mean there are taller sidewalls, and that means better bump absorption. Still, I would say that though this might be a little bit better than the Honda City, the Verna has the better ride quality overall. Before we wrap up, a word on styling, and it'll be a quick word because this can be quite subjective. Toyota's boss Akio Toyoda promised no more boring cars, but the Yaris seems caught in the transformation from old Toyota to new Toyota. The nose, though striking, doesn't quite gel convincingly with the safely designed rest of the car. There's nothing remarkable at the rear, and the small 15-inch wheels also give the Yaris a less than perfect stance. Hyundai, formerly known for its flamboyant designs, has toned it down with the new Verna. Styling is neat and tidy, but looks more like a heavy facelift of the previous model than an all-new car. The Verna's cascading grille and swept-up headlamps look good. The roof is nicely arched, and the taillights with their LED signatures are really eye-catching. LED headlights, meanwhile, are the talking point on the facelifted City. They not only provide excellent illumination but also add another dose of modernity to its arrow-shot design. 2017's update also brought with it a new chrome-rich grille and new premium-looking alloy wheels that do their bit to help hide the City's 4-year vintage. Time to arrive at a conclusion then, and if you haven't been able to spot the winner so easily, perhaps you've guessed which one doesn't make it to the top. Yup, it's the Yaris. It's a car that does many things well without being great at any one thing in particular. It comes across as a bit vanilla, and it just doesn't have the pull a midsize sedan with a Toyota badge on it should have. Sure, safety levels are best in class, and there are quite a few goodies in top spec trim too, but it is still very pricey by class standards. If you're going to be primarily sat at the back or have frequent use of the rear seats, the City is the car for you. The rear seat is easily the best in class, but we wouldn't blame you for picking the driver's seat either, as the engine and handling will thrill enthusiasts. But the Honda isn't perfect. It's the noisiest of the lot, the motor can be a bit weak if you don't rev it out, and it's also on the expensive side for what it gets you. The Verna it is then. It's the car that tops the scoring sheets across many parameters and offers the most feel-good experience on quality, refinement, general driving manners, and even value. So, if the limited rear seat space and mediocre fuel economy are not deal breakers for you, the Verna is the best petrol manual mid-size sedan you can buy today.